Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, to the 10th episode of the Road to FIDE Masters series, in which I will cover the game from the first round from Chess Eagles Chess Festival. If you missed all the previous episodes, it means that you missed the whole Baltic Pearl Festival, so for that you have to go back to my playlist. Today we will start talking about new tournament, 7th rounds, so 7th analysis to come, and we'll start with the first one, so let's jump straight into it. I opted for the pitch defense. Why? Because in the first round, when you are playing such a low rated opponent, below 1700 elo, you should go for the open stuff, right? And Sicilian, maybe some sharp stuff. But the thing is this, during the opening ceremony, my opponent were sitting next to me, in front of me at the chessboard, and he was preparing against me some closed Sicilian stuff. So I felt, okay, very strange, but I will not go into the Sicilian then, but rather change things a little bit. So that's why the pitch defense it is. We played the main line, nothing to really cover here. I believe that this is the first point that I have to talk about for a second. So if you have not missed my second episode of the series, in that episode I also played the pitch defense, then my opponent went for a rather g3 bishop g2 setup, and I was kind of out of ideas how to play this, because normally pitch is not my opening, and once again, even though I knew how to play this in terms of the main line, I didn't feel like it. I did not want to play the main line, and I tried to play something else, and the problem is that I opted once again for the, let's say, combination of moves that mix up all the ideas, and it's not working that well. Because what are the ideas? For example, you might try to just simply play b6, first of all stopping a5, which might be limiting your queenside development and so on, and maybe making space for the bishop, because after b6 d5, this is a common response for the opponent, bishop might be actually useful here. Other than that, you might try to play a5, because then you would like to exchange on d4, taking over the dark squares on the queen side, placing the knights here and there, and so on, so on. Other than that, you might try to just leave the queen side as it is, and maybe just play h6, something like that, and try to maneuver maybe like this, or like this. And what I did was basically mixing up everything, because I played queen c7, a move that is not that useful, but it's not that also making me any problems, so that's okay. But then I felt like, okay, let's play h6. Then let's try to go for this maneuver or this maneuver. But now let's switch it up and play here. So once again, I was not concrete, not playing solidly, without a very, very concrete idea. And I ended up in a bad position. What I should have played is knight f8, but I didn't want to do that because I felt like I would like to place the bishop there, but it was not good decision. In general, knight f8 would be very much better, because after knight f5, let's say, I can simply trade this bishop, keeping this one and having the control over the center of the board. But I opted for knight b6 as in the mentioned second episode, and then the knight got stuck there. So let's see how it goes. I played bishop e6 now, trying to maybe make the opponent exchange, because then I would take over the control over the f5 square, but obviously he does not go for it and plays queen f3, after which I decided to trade myself. And now look at this knight, guys. It has nowhere to jump to really. It might be kicked away to the c8 square. From c8 squared, once again, it's not that much that he can do. So all in all, I was trying to play a solid opening, after which I can outplay the opponent in the middle game, but basically what I'm doing is outplaying myself. Not ideal, right? Anyway, the game continued with knight f5, hitting the bishop, dropping the bishop back. And at first I felt like g4 might be really a crushing move for me, because the kingside attack starts, I have this h6, which might be a weakness because of g5 and so on. So I felt like I might be not losing the game, but losing like the initiative at all for a long time. However, I felt like the more concrete way of playing this for white would be indeed a5, as I've said, and maybe d5, trying to first of all take control, take the space on the queen side, then take the space in the center, because space on the king side is already taken. So I would have no like area at the chessboard, on the chessboard, to really attack the opponent on. And for example, after c5, there might be also some ideas like this, making use of those doubled pawns. But thankfully, opponent went with g4, because I realized that I can now open up the center, which is usually a good idea when your opponent is trying to attack you on the side of the board. And after that I can play knight c5, not only making way for my knight to jump back, you know, admitting to a mistake, but also hitting the pawn and also trying to go to e6. So multitask move that is allowed because I traded on d4, and actually white does not have a, let's say, clear way how to deal with this weakness, because I'm not only hitting the pawn but also I'm threatening with the fork, and there is no clear way how white can defend it, because I'm also putting pressure to this pawn, let's say. So a move like knight e2 would not work because this pawn would be hanging. So what, knight d1 or something? Like, it's not looking that great for the opponent. And also, if he is not willing to go back, maybe he will be willing to take some risk and attack me. And I was kind of baiting the opponent to sacrifice a piece, and he did that. He sacrificed on h6, guys. After which I took the knight because, well, why not? And then there is the checkmate pattern, checkmate threat that I had to deal with. But thankfully I saw it before my move, not after my move, so I was well prepared for it, meaning that at this point I have rook e5 move, closing the diagonal, closing the battery. And after the exchange, even though he got a rook and a pawn for 2 light pieces, so it's equal in terms of points, let's say. In terms of practical decision, it was not a good one, because opponent's position has many holes in it, many weaknesses, and I can just simply try to target them with the knights. So at this point I just took the pawn, and then my opponent opted for giving me even one more in order to at least gain some activity, but this activity should not be that threatening to me, because I can simply now go after the queen trade. So I played here queen f5. Okay, if queen f5, let's trade again, and let's trade again. So instead of thinking it through, really, I was just trying to make it as a short game as possible, because I felt like there is nothing that scary for me. But already queen f4 might be considered as an inaccuracy, because it led the g5 square to be, let's say, taken by the white pawn, kind of opening up my king. I did not realize it now, so I played it. Only now I realized, okay, maybe this was a mistake. Allowing to open the file might not be the best idea, but as of now, obviously, I'm having an eye on it, so not that scary. And I felt like, okay, let's go with rook c8, allowing the opponent to play rook f3, after which I decided, okay, I will just give up the queen for 2 rooks, and at this point I would decide whether I would like to take here and be taken that way, or take here and be taken that way. I also had in mind, you know, like my whole prep talk, how I will explain it in the YouTube video, and I will tell you, don't try this at home, you have a winning position, so why do you just give away the queen and so on. So instead of focusing on the game, I was focusing on the content, and I got punished, guys. Why is that? Because opponent played king g2, kind of, I felt like only changing the move order, right? Because after rook c1 he can once again just go here. But the thing is this, he exchanged on c1 and played g5, the move that I was trying to avoid. And what's the problem? The problem is that usually in chess, even losing such a pawn would be beneficial to the opponent if it means that the g5 will open. So one example line that I will give you is, for example, like that. Pawn will go straight to g7, giving up itself just for the files to be open. Computer is holding this position, but from the human perspective, it's very, very, very hard to not lose such position as black. So h5 is not working, right? At first I thought that, okay, I can just simply take the pawn, so what's the problem? Well, this is the problem. Attacking the pawn from this side, not allowing me to play anything with the bishop, not allowing me to play f6, and I might be once again losing practically, even though computer says it's around equal. So like, what to do? So I got into this position thinking, oh, what have I done, you know? Anyway, I found an idea of king h7, because I want to go away from the g file as quickly as possible, in order for myself to be allowed to, let's say, take on h6 with a queen, not the bishop, because usually the bishop would be pinned. That makes sense. And obviously the crucial line in here is that opponent might try to play rook g4, simply trying to go after my queen. And if I, let's say, don't want that, well, what can I do? Not that much, right? Bishop f6, hello, checkmate. Other moves, I'm not even sure what can I do differently. Maybe queen e6, but then after check, perhaps I have to go here. He may give a check, I go here. So he has at least a draw, but maybe something more. so plenty of holes in my position, so I might be losing. But I found this one variation that saved me from my stupidity early on, which is this. Bishop h6 first, and after he goes back, I will not go back repeating the moves, but I will play f6. And as of now, g8 square is taken care of by the queen. So, oof, my king is surviving, guys. But obviously it's not the end of the game, because my opponent still holds some initiative, but he was also in time trouble. So I felt like, okay, I was this close to throw this game away, but still I might have winning chances. What my opponent played? My opponent played rook h4, which is not a good move in general. Okay, it's pinning the bishop, but the problem with this move is that I am allowed to play queen d7. Not really caring about losing this pawn, because after queen f6 I can simply trade the queens, and with that finally I will be able to use my material advantage, which is obviously on this side of the board, right? Perhaps being able to queen the pawn, and for that reason he does not have any other square to go than b8, and after knight c8 this queen is like completely trapped, right? Nowhere to go, and for that reason opponent is nearly lost once again, thankfully. And not only that, he has not so many like activation possibilities for this queen. Like, what can he do to save it, you know? And I felt like a very funny maneuver would allow that, meaning that rook g4, rook g3, rook c3, trying to free the queen up. However, it would take 3 moves. Perhaps I can play something in between, not allowing that to happen. But I didn't even have enough time to think about all this, because my opponent went with f4 move, which is practically losing. It's not ideal, to say the least, to open up your king in such a dynamic position when your queen is trapped, mostly because I can now activate my queen. So my task was simple. I want to just give some checks in order to get this rook somehow. So how would it work? For example, after my check here, if opponent went to, let's say, king e3 square, I can simply deliver the double attack and get the rook, right? Simple. Okay, what happens if he plays king g3? Well, I can now play once again in here. After king g4, which is forced to protect the rook, I can deliver a check here. If he goes back, I can try to give a check once again here, because at this point, if he goes back, I go here, once again getting the rook. If he goes here, well, now I perhaps might try to take the pawn with the pawn. And if he goes up the board, I can simply deliver one more check, one more check, one more check, and then checkmate at the end. So very funny line that the king goes around all the chessboard and gets checkmated in the center. Obviously, king f6 is possible too, but then I give the check. Finally, once again, getting the rook. With one last trick, I'm not afraid of losing the knight because of this pin. So I felt like, okay, oof, I'm alright. And opponent went with king f2, but I found queen c2 check, because after he will drop back to the first rank, I can always give one more check and grab this pawn for free, and then continue checking, while also having a new idea to win the game, which is to just make this passer a queen. And not only that, if he goes to f3 square, I can deliver a check on b3. If he goes down, I can take the pawn. If he goes up, I can play here and finally get into the situation I wanted, meaning that if he goes here, I can repeat the variation I just showed you guys. If he goes up the board, I can immediately go here and here to grabbing the rook, and that's the point in the game where my opponent resigned. So far from being clean, as you saw in the thumbnail, many blunders in here, and I was clearly not happy with the position. Let's see the review, guys. I did not look at it previously, so let's just check it. Under 90%, never a good situation. As you can tell, I was better, but then, well, I threw it all away. Thankfully, my opponent blundered as the last one, so I won the game. But such a game is not a good sign of the whole tournament, let's say. So, thank you for watching this one. Give me a like to cheer me up after such a horrible game, and we'll see each other tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.